extraordinary level of devotion of the devotees here, especially the gopīs and Śrīmati Radharani. Never heard of before. No one had ever known such devotion. All of these symptoms of the highest level of devotion are mentioned in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and even in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, and then they're deciphered by our great ācāryas, talking about how when Uddhava came here, at first the gopīs thought that a Krura had come back, because they just saw a chariot parked outside Nanda and Yashoda's house. And they said, oh, what did Krura come back? He didn't take enough? Already he's killed us, so what if he came back again? Now what does he want? Our flesh? But it doesn't hardly matter, they said, because they already, practically, Krura already killed us by taking away Krishna, so what does it matter to us? But the next day when they found out that it was Uddhava, and Uddhava is known to look just like Krishna. He dressed like Krishna, he looked like Krishna. They surrounded him, unabashedly, no etiquette of here's a dignitary from out of town. When they got an inkling that he was a representative of Krishna, they just surrounded him and they were begging him for information from Krishna. And Krishna had sent a letter for him to read. It was during that time that one of the most important pastimes in the Bhagavatam takes place, and that is that as Uddhava's telling the message of Krishna to the gopīs, his topmost devotee, Śrīmati Radharani, who's mentioned in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam in code, Aradhanam. There are other Puranas that mention her directly, but when Shukadeva Goswami was speaking about Śrīmati Radharani, he was very careful not to mention her by name because he had a special bhava in his heart. When he would say the name of Śrīmati Radharani, he would often faint in ecstasy. And he knew he only had 7 days to speak to Parikshit Maharaj, therefore he constrained himself. Aradhanam, she who has performed the highest service to Krishna. It's unavoidable in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam to come to this meaning that there is one devotee, one gopi who performed the highest service, and that's Śrīmati Radharani. In the case of the meeting of Uddhava with the gopis here, as he was talking to them, he noticed the ecstasy of Śrīmati Radharani, and that a bee had flown in and was moving around as bees tend to do, and Śrīmati Radharani conversed with the bee and said, oh, you're a messenger from Krishna. I know he sent you here. You're an unreliable servant of an unreliable master. I know you. I know Krishna. As soon as a person finishes a job, they have no more use for them. She talked about how Krishna was a cheater. He came as Vamana and he stole everything from Bali Maharaj. We know Krishna's character, she was saying. She was blaspheming Krishna, apparently. And she was talking to the bee again and again. Go tell your master, we know his ways here. And when the bee disappeared, then she began to lament. And she thought, oh no, this bee, this messenger will go back and tell Krishna whatever I said. Maybe he'll never come back. And in this way, she was talking incoherently. And you'll find in the Madhya Lila of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita the categorization of all the different kinds of speech that she engaged in that are indicative of the highest levels of prema for Krishna that are exhibited exclusively in Śrīmati Radharani. So when Uddhava saw this, he was humbled because in Dwarka he's known as the greatest devotee. Haridasa Varyo, we know this verse from Hantaya Madhura Bala Haridasa Varyo. There are 3 Haridasas who are the best: Yudhishthir, Govardhan, and Uddhava. But when Uddhava came here and he saw the quality of devotion of the residents of Vṛndāvana, he said, I'm nothing. In fact, he made this prayer, that's what's on the wall, that let me come in my next life as a clump of grass. And that way, if I'm somewhere near the marg, where the gopis walk, let the dust come up from their lotus feet and land on my head, and that will be the perfection of my life. If that's a be there, you can tell him he's an unreliable servant and an unreliable master. And so this stands as a monument to the greatness of the devotees of Vṛndāvana. There's no higher way of worshipping Krishna. Arajo Bhagavan Rajesha Tanayasta Dhamma Vṛndāvana Ramya Kachit Pasana Raja Vidu Vargena Valkalpita Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pumarto Mahan. This is from the Chaitanya Manjusha. Says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu held these truths to be the highest and most important. Number one, Krishna and Vṛndāvana are the same. There's no difference. Number two, that the method of worshipping Krishna, which was carried by the gopīs of Vṛndāvana, is the highest method. There's no one that can worship Krishna more perfectly than the gopīs headed by Srimati Radharani. And he said that the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is the perfect Purana. It's Amala. There's no fault in it at all. It's the ultimate truth and the deciding factor on all matters, philosophical or spiritual or otherwise. Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is the topmost. And Prema Pumarta Mahan, that the highest goal of life, beyond Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, what most people are working hard for, is Krishna Prema. So just a couple minutes about Uddhava. Uddhava in Dwarka. During the time that Krishna was in Dwarka, there was an assembly of demigods headed by Lord Brahma who came to see Krishna there. As we know, in the very beginning of the 10th Canto, Mother Bhumi comes to Brahma and says, we have a burden on the earth. It needs to be rectified. And then Bhumi and Krishna go with all the devas to the shore of the ocean of milk, and they chant Purusha Sukta. And then Krishna gives a transmission of message into the heart of Brahma, Teni Brahma Hrida, and say, I'm coming, and all the demigods, they should also come here as well. Everyone should assemble here to assist me with my pastimes, and I'll cut down the demons and I'll uplift the devotees. Paricharnaya sadhunam, vinashaya chajuskritam. And so that was the beginning of Krishna's pastimes. But how do they end? When in Dwarka, Uddhava saw Brahma and all the devas come to meet Krishna in a huge assembly. You can understand something was afoot. So he could discern that now Brahma had come back, and this was the case, to tell Krishna that you've done everything. You've done everything we asked you for. He had killed all the demons. In fact, the last demons he killed were Dantabhakra and Vidurata. And then he went back into Vṛndāvana for 2 months. But then he was getting ready to leave the planet. And the stage was set because Brahma and the demigods came and told Krishna, you've completed your mission that we asked you for, now you can go. You can go back. And so, after the demigods left, Uddhava, in great anxiety, foreseeing that there would be separation from Krishna, he came to him and offered his Dandavata obeisances and asked him for some last instruction. And there you'll find in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam the Uddhava Gita. This is a very important exposition. We have the Bhagavad Gita and we have the Uddhava Gita. So we'll find in the Uddhava Gita, everything's there complete in the Bhagavad Gita, but it's in code form. It's simple, straightforward, but it's all fluffed out in the Uddhava Gita. Uddhava asks questions and Krishna answers everything. That's why it's so important to read the 11th canto, especially the Uddhava Gita. Then Uddhava leaves by the direction of Krishna to go to Badarika Ashram. He asked him to go there and explain devotional service to the great devotees on the planet. After all, Krishna was just here. Not everyone knew about his pastimes, nor would they know about the mystery of Krishna leaving the planet. And that comes to the next aspect of Uddhava's involvement, because as he left Dwarka to go to Badarika Ashram, he got news of Krishna bringing all his relatives, the Yadus, to Prabhash. And there at Prabhash, he had a grand plan, just like a magician, to make everyone disappear. And that plan was that they would based on the curse that was given because of Samba misrepresenting that he was pregnant to the sages, headed by Narada, and having been cursed, and having come back and told Ugrasena of the curse, and that there would be, they asked, when Samba was a boy dressed up like he was pregnant, they asked the sages in a haughty way, what do you think it is, a boy or a girl? And the sages, not standing for this nonsense, said to them, what it is, Narada said on behalf of the sages, is an iron lump that will be the end of your dynasty. And they became shocked, because they had insulted the sages. And now they went back to Ugrasena. They revealed that what they had started as a joke, now there was an iron lump. So Ugrasena made the mistake of just grinding it up and throwing it into the ocean. There was one last piece of that iron lump that he threw in, the rest was powder. That powder became these iron stalks along the beach that the Yadus ended up in a mad scene of intoxication, killing each other off. And Krishna, just after that pastime, had repaired to the forest near Prabhash. And Uddhava, feeling separation from the Lord, had come back to meet him again and found him in that lonely forest leaning against a young banyan tree, which indicated that we're in a very small universe. And there he was in a relaxed and very pensive mood. And Uddhava asked him more questions at that time. And at that time also Maitreya just happened to come along and see that Krishna was there, Uddhava was there, and he sat down and listened very carefully to their discussion. After that, Uddhava left Krishna, and he traveled and met Vidura here in Vṛndāvana. And Vidura had asked Uddhava to become his guru, but Uddhava said, you're older than me. And besides, I have seva to do in Bhadarik Ashram, and there's somebody as qualified, more qualified than me, and he's also your contemporary, and that's Vidura. So, Maitreya. So please meet with Maitreya and ask him for his instruction, because he's heard it directly, just as I did from Krishna. And so we find Uddhava then goes off to do his seva for Krishna, and then comes the story of Krishna, of Maitreya and Vidura. But there's one other meeting. In that meeting of Vidura and Uddhava, there's a section in the third canto of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam in which Vidura asks some questions to Uddhava, and Uddhava, before he can answer, he has to pull himself away from the spiritual world. He's standing on this earth, but he has to pull himself away consciously from the spiritual world to be able to answer Vidura. And this is something that the ācāryas note, that when one becomes perfect in Krishna consciousness, although we may be walking on this earthly planet, still our consciousness is fully engaged in Krishna's pastimes in the spiritual world. So this was Uddhava, who is very, very dear to Lord Kṛṣṇa, who carried the message for Krishna, who discovered the greatest devotees and commemorated it by his prayers that he wrote, glorifying the gopīs of Vṛndāvana. And here we are at Uddhava Kuṇḍa. We can also pray that somehow or other we can get the dust of the feet of the great devotees. When we were driving in the rickshaw, somehow we took a shortcut. We drove across a dusty road, and I could hear that Sudhir Madhava was joking in the front seat about how we were getting a Rajabhishekam. Do you know what that is? It's a dust bath. And that's, with my final point, what is most recommended for advancement in devotional service. Ruganai tapasana yatin chejaya nirvapanadgrihadva. This comes from the story of Fifth Canto with Maharaj Rahugana and Jud Bharat, who says that you can't make advancement in this world by simply performing severe austerities. Some yogis, they sit in cold water up to their neck, or they sit around hot fire in the summertime, or they decide not to eat for long periods of time. Whatever austerity somebody takes up, he said, this is not how you make it spiritual advancement. He says, until you get the Raja Abhishek, the dust bath from the feet of a pure devotee. That's when you make advancement. And on a very practical level, this means to take up some service in the Guru Parampara, become the servant. And this is the method by which we can go back home, back to Godhead, following the mood of Sri Uddhava, that let me be insignificant in service, not be insignificant, but to feel insignificant and then become significant by taking the dust from the feet of the great devotees, meaning that I absorb myself in their mood and method for practicing Krishna consciousness and spreading it all over the world. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Uddhava, if you so desire, please let us follow in your footsteps and gain an inkling about the mood of the residents of Vṛndāvana, especially Srila Prabhupada. His mood was so spontaneous that he jumped on a boat at the age of 70 years old and came alone to the United States. This is a kind of spiritual madness that emulates the mood of the devotees here in Vṛndāvana. Please let us follow in that mode. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part, please say Hare Krishna.